Welcome to A Bunch of Therapists,
the podcast that goes behind the doors of the therapy room.
Our guests will be sharing their experiences of counselling and psychotherapy,
and all the lessons they've learned on the journey through life.
This episode is hosted by Dipti Solanki and me, Michaela McCarthy.
Our guest this week is Amy Launder.
Hi Amy.
Hiya.
Tell us about, what it was like for you when you started the journey of therapy.
Yeah, so I actually knew that I wanted to be a therapist around 15. The idea just popped into my head and it kind of grew from there to the point where I changed schools for A-levels because my school didn't do psychology, and I kind of knew that was the path that I wanted to go down. So became a qualified therapist by the time I was 27. Is that all right?
That's really young, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right. Maybe even 24. I can't remember now. It feels like a long time ago.
Just tell, why 15? What made you think, this would be good?
Do you know, I actually can't tell. I wouldn't be able to tell you what it was. Something just popped into my head, and then we did that careers test at school, and all of it aligned with that as well. But that came after it. The idea just popped into my head. I'd never been to therapy. I didn't know any therapists. I have no idea where it came from. It just came out of the blue.
It's quite unusual.
Yes,
Very
yeah, because I know a lot of therapists go into therapy after being in therapy themselves. And it's like a second career, but I never had a career before this. And I'm quite jealous of therapists that have had a different career before this. But
So how's it going?
yeah, really good. I also always knew that I wanted to go into private practice, which I think is maybe a bit unusual too. So that started when I was 28. Again, quite early, I think. So yeah.
So tell me about your journey training.
So I went the university route. So I went straight from school to university to do psychology. Then I did a graduate certificate in counselling and psychotherapy. And then I did a master's in psychotherapy and counselling at the University of Leeds. And then I qualified and moved straight back down to London pretty much the day after I qualified, and lost my whole network of therapists, which is why I came to the Awareness Centre.
So you turned up at our door.
Turned up on your door, rebuilt my network of therapists.
What did we say to you when you turned up?
Well, I got a placement, which I was qualified. I don't know if that was allowed, but I got it in.
Oh, really?
And did my placement, and then became a team leader and have never left you.
So just for listeners and viewers, a placement, explain what a placement is for counselling and psychotherapy.
Yes. So when you're training as a therapist, you need to do a certain amount of hours, like junior doctors do, hours in GP surgeries and things like that. So you do a placement whilst you're training to get a certain number of hours to qualify. But then I did an extra one after I was qualified because I lost my network of therapists. Sure. So
I think that's so important, isn't it? That network and having other people in that world.
Yeah.
So TAC kind of gave you that grounding.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell me about all the different roles that you've kind of had while being here.
Yeah, so my placement was in NHS Lambeth.
Yeah.
So I saw 4 clients a week in a block on a Thursday afternoon, still remember. And then I had in-house supervision, group supervision at TAC, and then I just had my regular job on the side, which was I was a barista, so I made lovely coffee. And then when I became a team leader, I was one of the team leaders for the NHS Lambeth. So that involved supporting the placement therapists and helping out with their admin, making sure they were doing all the things that they were meant to be doing. So after each session, you have to write notes on the NHS system, you have to do risk assessments, you have to write letters to the GP if that is something that needs to happen. And so as a team leader, I was making sure all of that was being done properly as well. That's probably
So you got a job.
Stuff.
So you came to us knowing nobody in the therapy world, went on placement to get some more hours to meet people as well.
Yeah.
And then you got a job.
Yeah.
And
got a job.
And then you left the coffee shop.
Left the coffee shop. So I got a job, left the coffee shop and started building up my private practice at the same time, because the team leader job was 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And so that still involved seeing clients, but mainly it was the admin side of it and the looking after the other placement therapists. And then alongside that, I also started doing some marketing with you guys. So writing blog posts, and I did the Instagram for a little bit, and newsletters and things like that. And then I now teach on the diploma at the end of the diploma about private practice. And I am also now a course supervisor. So many jobs within the Awareness Centre.
Yeah. So what was it like, you turning up being a young therapist, and then clients turn up and see a young therapist? How did you deal with that?
I did struggle a little bit with some clients saying I was too young and wanting to be referred to another therapist.
So don't you say that?
Yeah. So it did happen, but it weirdly happened with people who are maybe 10 years older than me, mid-30s, late 30s. People older than that, I think, weren't bothered, because most of the therapists were younger than them. So then it didn't really make too much difference. And then I kind of had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about being young and looking young. And so I think it affected my confidence. And then that was more what clients were picking up on than my age. It was that I was anxious and I was maybe people pleasing, trying to get them to stay in the therapy and things like that. And once I worked through that, which just came with having more hours, basically more experience, then the age thing wasn't an issue anymore. And I found when I first went into private practice as well, I avoided putting my picture on my website and any directories, because I was like, I'm not going to get clients because they're going to see that I'm younger than them. And then obviously they would come into the room and see me. So the picture thing didn't really make any difference in the end. So when I embraced it, I ended up getting clients who wanted a therapist who was closer to their age, and they were younger clients. And so it worked for me in the end. But I had to get over myself, basically, at that point.
Now you're over in the training school, and you're working with students who haven't got a placement yet. Well, they're starting to. So
they're on the cusp of getting their first client.
So you're starting with going right back to the core.
Yeah, which is really lovely seeing. I mean, some of them have clients from other jobs. One of them worked in the prison under the chaplaincy service, and someone does mentoring and things like that. So they have client experience, but a lot of them are going into the NHS placement with TAC. And so having had that experience myself, I feel in a good place to be able to kind of talk them through how to use the forms and all of that, as well as just the supporting them in their own anxieties and getting going on the placement. So, yeah.
In terms of placement, the other part of it, so as a nearly qualified therapist, when you go into placement, it's quite an experience, isn't it? And I know for me and a lot of my colleagues, anxiety really plays a big part in that. So maybe could you reflect on, I know you've reflected on the anxiety of perhaps being people seeing you as being younger, even if you were a bit older. What other kinds of anxieties did you experience?
I had the real anxiety of not knowing if I would be able to handle whatever was coming through the door, basically, which I know now, being on the other side of it and supporting placement therapists and trainee therapists, that's not just me. Did you do that thing of trying to preempt what everything they might come with and what you might do and help with? And yes, definitely. And luckily, I mean, most placements you get a bit of information about the client before you first see them. So I would then research everything about whatever it was on the assessment. But then people are people and they're not textbooks. And so you can research everything, but then
they come with something completely different.
They'll come with something different. Their experience of whatever it is completely different. And so it's about the human connection in the first instance. And, you know, if it really is something that you're not qualified to work with, then you talk to whoever is supporting you on placement, and they'll either work with you to build up your skills and your confidence, or the client will go to someone who is better suited for them. And so I think that's the big anxiety for most trainee therapists, is who's going to walk through the door, and am I going to be the right therapist for them?
Yeah, because we have a lot of theory that we rely on and we learn about, and all these amazing skills. But actually, when you're in the room with with your client, it's just you and the client, and there's nothing that you can quickly refer to. Yeah. What I love about what you've shared is that I should imagine most people imagine when you're a therapist, it's just one-to-one practice. But there are so many different avenues where you can diversify your skills and show up in different roles. And if you're anything like I am, it's so important because you can engage different parts of you. Because most people, when they come to this career, they've built up so many different skill sets from other areas of life. How does it feel to be able to kind of use different parts of yourself as a therapist?
Yeah, I really love it. I think I'll tell any therapist that will listen to not just do one-on-one therapy. I think you can really burn out that way, and you can also, the relationship between you and your clients could get a bit muddied if that's your only income stream as well. I think having multiple income streams makes the therapy really purely about the therapy, rather than thinking like, oh God, they're going to leave. I'm not going to be able to pay my bills if I don't get another client in. I kind of wanted to get rid of that completely. So I have so many different revenue streams, and some are really like once a year, like teaching the workshop at the end of the diploma is once or twice a year. But then renting out therapy rooms and doing course supervision.
Of now, so you'll be
I'll have a lot more. Be quids in. But having loads of different things, and also not just doing the same thing every day. Like my every day is different during the week, and every week is different from the last, and I really love that.
But it's interesting you say that, because some therapists, they do work throughout the week as a therapist, and don't, mix it up a bit. And that's fine if they're comfortable being in a room with other people for the week. I found for me that's kind of never really worked for me. I do hear about therapists saying that they get lonely. Because they don't get to see other people.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a weird thing, because people who are not therapists will go, but you're with people all day long. But it's different because you're there for them. It's not a two-way relationship. So it can get lonely. And I think particularly in private practice, if you don't make the effort to keep networking and meeting other therapists and doing things outside of work as well, you can just be really lonely and burn out, and
it can be all encompassing, can't it?
Yeah.
I think this conversation is really important to have, because while therapy is a caring profession, it's also you set up as a business.
If you work in private practice.
And I think that sometimes it feels like there's a bit of a conflict there, but actually we have to be really clear that we're setting up as individuals in business, also in caring professions, and how can we balance those two things. And for a long time, I've not heard these conversations around, how can I make this work as a business? How can I pay my bills without keeping, staying awake all night, and knowing that this is a sustainable business model as well. So, and I love that you help people kind of build that up for themselves.
Yeah. I think it's really important, because because it's a caring profession, there can be a lot of kind of shame about charging a certain amount of money or having a cancellation policy. And I'm actually seeing it less and less as the years go on, as I'm teaching these diploma workshops, which I really love. The therapists are more business minded, and maybe it's the way that you guys are teaching at the Awareness Centre. But there's they're able to kind of merge the therapy and the business side of themselves, whereas for a long time for me it felt like two different hats. Like you were the business person in one space and the therapist in the other space, but actually they cross over a lot, particularly if it's like clients are constantly late with paying. Like that is probably part of the therapy, rather than that being a separate thing that you just email them about later.
But in terms of your own practice, is there a certain niche, if you like? I don't really like that word, or do you see, is there a theme of things that you deal with within your practice?
Yeah, so my niche developed quite naturally over time, but I see people who have emotionally immature parents, which is a niche, but actually isn't, because every single client presents very differently who have had emotionally immature parents. And so I worried when I went into a niche that it would just be the same thing over and over again, but actually I've probably not had the same presenting issue twice within that niche.
And can you tell me, and the viewers and listeners, what an emotionally immature parent or person actually is? What are their traits?
Yeah, so the main underlying one is that the family revolves around them rather than around the children. So, and this, I'm talking about when they're very young children, when things are meant to revolve around the children. It's kind of meant to be top down in that way when they're younger. But for an emotionally immature parent, the family revolves around them. So if mum or dad is upset, everyone has to be quiet in the house. No one else can be happy.
Walking on eggshells.
And walking on eggshells is the main
It happens a lot
thing.
when you have a depressive mother or an alcoholic parent, that their children become the little carers.
Exactly.
And don't have their own emotional maturity to be able to handle that. And lots of issues can happen to them as they start to grow.
Yeah, exactly. So then I end up seeing the clients who then they have issues in their own relationships, romantic relationships or friendships or workplace, because they're so used to catering to the parent and not looking after their own needs. And so they're overgivers, or they don't have the proper boundaries in place to protect.
And do you work with people who are emotionally immature and are questioning what's going on in their life that's not working?
I haven't really, because I think mainly they don't think there's anything wrong with them, so they don't come to therapy. What I do see is clients questioning if they are emotionally immature or narcissistic, because they've been always told by the parent that they are selfish, and if they're just saying what they need, that's seen as selfish, and so they then grow up thinking that they are selfish or emotionally immature themselves, or even narcissistic themselves. And so there's a lot of needing to normalize and validate what went on was not normal for them. So I have a lot of clients kind of explaining really kind of horrific situations and then going, but was it that bad? Yeah, it was that bad. And so there's a lot of needing to validate, because they were invalidated a lot growing up.
But it's like, having people coming in and kind of questioning because they're reading a lot of stuff on socials or whatever, is that I wonder whether it's a positive sometimes, but it can become a bit of a hindrance, because going into therapy, knowing that there's something wrong with you as a person, you don't know what you're going into.
Yeah.
I wonder whether that can not be better, but different.
There is, sometimes people coming in thinking that they are a certain attachment style and just almost treating it like that's a given, and there's no room to discuss it or to kind of break it down or see if that even is the case. They've just read, okay, I'm anxiously attached, and then they kind of give it to me as if that's just the way I am.
But that's so different from when I started out, because actually I went into therapy because a friend of mine in Hampstead said to me, I said, oh, my life's not great anyway. And at that point in my life, she said, oh, why don't you go into therapy? So I said, well, why not? I don't know anyone that's actually been in therapy in my circle. Yeah. I thought, I've got nothing to lose. So I went in blind. I had no idea what to expect. No one had said anything. I knew I had issues, but I went in with one issue. And then I come out with 25 issues, but I had part of a language, but not the language that I think people have today. You can just speak to people that haven't been in therapy, but they have a language.
Yeah. That language is so important because it gives you access to that inner world that most people don't know how to make sense of. It helps people make sense of themselves, I think. We've got listeners who are hopefully listening to this thinking, that makes sense. I kind of connect to that. Not really sure about that. What do you think are the biggest things that people can recognise in themselves that might be signs that therapy may help them, especially in terms of emotional immaturity, parents, other key figures in their life?
If they are questioning, was it that bad? Am I being overdramatic? Am I too sensitive? All of these kind of gaslighty type terms, it's worth going to therapy even just to explore whether it was that bad. I'm just going to stop you
there for a minute. So for our listeners, I know we all use that term gaslighting.
I don't.
Everyone apart from Michaela. What does gaslighting mean?
So it actually comes from a play called Gaslight or Gaslit, which was, I haven't actually seen it, I need to see it, but it was essentially someone was sneaking around in the flat above where he lived with his wife and turning on the lights up there, which turned down the gas lights in their apartment because there was only so much gas to go around. And she was saying, I think there's someone breaking in. I think there's something going on upstairs. And he was saying, no, you're imagining it. So that's where the term comes from.
Yeah, that is a gaslighting.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When people say, like, you imagine it, there's many terms. I've seen a whole list.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know the provenance of that term.
Yeah.
I knew what people meant by gaslighting.
I think it really helps to make it clear when you know exactly where it's come from. Like, there's another term called flying monkeys in the narcissistic world, which comes from the Wizard of Oz, which was the Wicked Witch never actually went out and did her own dirty work. She sent out the flying monkeys. So if and when you cut off a narcissistic person from your life, they will send out their friends, their siblings, their partner, whoever, to your house, for example, or through messages to say, oh, they really miss you, they need you, and all this stuff. So it's not them doing the dirty work, it's their flying monkeys.
Interesting.
So that's where that comes
Thanks
from.
for
as well.
clearing that up. Yeah.
When someone's going into therapy and they're going on a journey and they're questioning and they're curious and everything, and we use that word a lot because I think we need to be curious. I know that some younger people will go into therapy for a few sessions, okay? I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. But I do say to people, it's probably best to go into therapy a bit longer than a few sessions. And I sometimes say it's a bit like going to the gym for a few sessions with a personal trainer. It don't work. I've tried it. Have you tried it?
Yes.
You tried it?
I think most of us
Yeah.
have done
Right?
that.
You've really got to keep at it.
Yeah,
You've got to keep going and keep at it. I do admire people that really are dedicated.
Yeah.
I think on that point, it's a really important point because for most people, they will see therapy as something you go to when you're at crisis point. But actually, the power of therapy, when you get beyond those crises and then you really start to open up this whole new inner world and the self-development. I mean, what do you think about that, Amy?
Yeah, I think it's so important. And actually, when I'm now working with trainee therapists, this is kind of because you have to go to therapy when you're training.
Yeah.
This is a lot of the time, the first time that people are going without there being a crisis. And they're realizing, oh, wow, I can actually go a lot deeper here. It's not just getting back up to being okay and managing. And then I leave therapy. I've got to keep going. So I need to find more things to talk about. And the self-exploration goes a lot deeper. And so it becoming more of a maintenance thing, even when you're not a trainee or not a therapist, just dipping in and out of therapy or going for longer periods of time, but not waiting until crisis point to go into
On
therapy.
another point as well, though, that self-exploration, I think, is just so empowering and powerful. But for some people who come from the viewpoint of, well, isn't that then just navel gazing? So that self-exploration, how does that change the way that you show up in the world? I think that's a really important point to focus on. What's your take on
So
that?
I think, there are people in my life who have not been to therapy who see other people who have been in therapy for a long time and go, oh, the way they speak is because they've been in therapy. And so some people find it quite annoying, but actually they can't take a joke. And actually they're just standing up for themselves because they've been in therapy to say, I don't find that funny, that kind of thing.
So develop their own voice.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And so I think it can be navel gazing, but if you're using it in the real world, then there is benefits to everyone around you as well.
What kind of benefits?
So, I mean, if you're a parent, there's benefits to your own children. If you're in therapy and kind of dealing with your own stuff so that I'm going to use the word trigger, so that your children don't trigger
not
things
that
in
word.
you. I know I'm using it in a way because I know we don't like it, but you can only be triggered if there's something there to trigger. And so if you're going to therapy, then, I mean, we all get annoyed by our own children sometimes. I'm at the stage with it having a 2-year-old, and so there's a lot of things that are very frustrating, but going to therapy so that I understand, okay, I'm frustrated because of this, rather than shouting, is beneficial to my child and to, any parent who has a child. But also to be able to have a healthy relationship with your own parents or your friends or co-workers or whoever, and also to be able to see your family who are potentially emotionally immature or even narcissistic, to keep a relationship but also protect yourself
So important.
is really important.
I mean, I really enjoy, the community of therapy.
Yeah.
I've kind of grown up with it.
Yeah.
But I didn't go into, I was 30-ish. But I was, you know, I fell into it really from someone saying, look, you know, you give it a go.
Yeah.
And actually, it's been the best thing that I've ever done my entire life. Because the more I get to know myself, the better I'm a person with other people.
Yeah.
You know.
And I love going to see different therapists as well, like for significant periods of time each, but you get something different from every different therapist as well, because people bring their own experiences. I think you mentioned earlier, like therapists forget who they were before becoming therapists, and we all have a whole lifetime of experiences and different careers that people have had. And so your experience of one therapist will be different with another therapist, and I think that's really lovely as well.
Not changing them every week.
No, that's why I said significant periods of time. But over time, having different therapists, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So if you were to have a message out there to the listeners and viewers, what would you say to them?
If you are questioning whether there is something, go and explore it. Even if it's something terrible has happened, or something you just feel a bit uncomfortable about, or something you're not sure about, go and find a therapist and talk to them. And also, if you don't have a good first experience of therapy, don't give up.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
key. That's key. Thank you for coming in today.
Thanks, Amy.
You've been listening to A Bunch of Therapists with me, Michaela McCarthy, and Dipti Solanki. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate and review.
And don't forget to follow us on our socials to keep up to date with all of our news. Thank you so much, and until next time.